contrast to being sequential, which is one at a time, it is simultaneous. It can process many, many different inputs, sensory inputs, visual inputs, auditory inputs, all at the same time. Extremely good at that. It is emotional as opposed to control. When James Brady was shot in the head, his emotional system became upset. In a recent interview on TV, he burst out crying uncontrollably. It had nothing to do with the fact that he was on TV. It's just that he no longer is able to control his emotions. People who are dominant in the right brain are much more emotional than those who are dominant in the left. It is able to synthesize into a gestalt as opposed to analyze into the pieces and parts. Now, it's very important that we understand that this is a dichotomy, and all dichotomies are dangerous, and I warn you that this one, because it's something that we need to guard against in terms of jumping to conclusions too rapidly. Many people have felt for years that handedness is the key issue in terms of dominance. How many among you here in this audience are left-handed? Raise your hands, please. Let me just count that. I'd like to know. Hold your hands up for just a second so I can count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I note 10, 11, 12. Everybody raised their left hand excepting one. The question of handedness is in the area of dominance, but it is not the only or controlling aspect. This will show you some of the research that has been done with respect to handedness, and my interest in it has to do with its effect on the location of the language center. The language center is in one of both brains and very, very rarely distributed between both. You can note here that the typical right-handed person who holds the pen in that position here is a person who has the language center in the left brain, which represents approximately 90% of the people living on Earth. This is in contrast to the left-handed person who is holding the pen in the same position, where the language center is mirror image reversed in the right brain. There are about 10% left-handers in the world. Out of that 10%, 65% have their language center in the left brain, similar to right-handed people, and they hold their pen in this looped across position, which is a physical accommodation to the fact that the language center is displaced. There's a very small percentage of right-handers who hold their hand in a crook position. This is less than 1%. Now, the reason that this is important is that language is logical, it is sequential, it is linear. And so if the language center is in one hemisphere, it will tend to establish the principal modality of that hemisphere. So that hemisphere then gets to be the logical, rational, linear, sequential hemisphere. And for most of us, that is the left brain. Now, I want to again warn you about simplistic conclusions. I'll try and develop the story far enough so that you will be protected in your understanding of it. But I would like to establish the notion of brain dominance for your consideration. First, I would like to establish the idea of dominance in the first place. Now, we had a number of people who raised their hand when I asked the question, how many of you are left-handed? I assume that all the rest of you are right-handed, so that we have then a number of you who are left and right, and that's perfectly okay and normal. might not realize that you also have an eye dominant condition. And let's just test that right now. If you would hold your finger out of one hand like this and place it so that you are blocking me out with that finger. Use both eyes, open both eyes, hold the hand out, place the finger. Now you'll see around the finger a little bit. You'll have sort of a double image. But place it as nearly as you can to block me out. Now alternately close one eye and then the other. And what happens? Is it not true that most of you are seeing better out of one eye than the other? And that when you close one of the eyes, the finger was over here several inches or feet away from me. What does that mean? That means that as you see, and you are not conscious of this, you are seeing more dominantly out of one eye than the other, just as you are using one hand more dominantly than the other, probably one ear, probably one foot more dominantly than the other. So dominance then gets to be the human condition. It's perfectly normal. It would be rather abnormal for people to be so exquisitely balanced in terms of the duality of them that everything was equal, that both hands were exactly the same, both eyes, both feet, both ears. So it's perfectly normal that we are dominant, and if we are dominant in our hands and feet, then it is to ask that a dominant brain. If one of the two hemispheres is better at doing a task, then it will probably do all, and the other hemisphere will idle. We can measure that using standard EEG techniques. You can tell whether a hemisphere is turned on or turned off. It is either alert and in beta, or it is relaxed and in alpha or theta. Even when one hemisphere thinks it's better at doing the task, it will do it all. One of our hemispheres smarter than the other one. For most of us, it is our left brain that would think that it could do it all, because it's got the power of speech, it's got the power of negotiation, it's got the power to rationalize. And so it is typically the more dominant hemisphere. I've invented two characters here that are classically dominant.